Hi everybody, I'm Corinne Blackstone and welcome to my craft room. I'm so happy to have you here today, and before we get started, be sure that you're subscribed here on YouTube. That way you don't miss out on any of the fun crafty content that we have coming. Today's video, I'm going to go all over how to make money with your Cricut. And by saying that, I mean how do you price your products so you actually make money.
Whatever we would do, we do it just for fun.
I see a lot of people fall into the pitfalls of just charging for the cost of materials or not charging nearly enough, and then they get discouraged in their business because they're not making any money. And there's reasons for that, and I can understand why people do it. You don't want to overprice. You feel like you're asking your friends and family to pay a ton of money for stuff, but you really need to put a value on you, your work, and your brand. Now, if you're ready to start making money, let's talk about how we price our items. The first thing I want to make sure that you guys know is that the prices that you start with are not necessarily going to be the prices that you keep throughout your business journey. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Reason number one might be the cost of materials goes up. It's really important to check into those costs periodically, because as the price of materials goes up and you pay more for it, you need to pass that price on to your consumer, or it really cuts into your profits. So as you start making, as you start doing things, just keep tabs on the cost of those materials that you're using. Another reason to raise your cost is because you got better at what you do. As your skills improve, as your products improve, you're going to be able to charge a little bit more money. For example, when I started crocheting, I was only making little tiny cat toys, and I was charging $3 for a cat toy. Now my cat toys are much more advanced, they're much better quality, so I can now charge $10 for a cat toy. Now, that's just the only thing I really sell is crochet items. I actually don't sell anything that I make with my Cricut because I always want to be sure that I'm teaching you guys for free, and I feel like if I'm selling my Cricut stuff, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. And I don't really have the time to do it, so that's partially why. And then another reason that your prices might go up is the economy. Now, as we know, inflation exists, and that still has to do to a little bit with those material costs, because as the economy changes, so do material costs, so does the cost of living. So that's something to keep in mind when you are thinking about pricing. Make sure that you're periodically checking on your prices, making sure that they're still where they should be, and that you are still making a good profit from your product. Now, when you're figuring out the price for a product, there's a lot of items that you need to factor in, and I think people forget about some of them. So of course, you want to factor in the cost of your materials. So whatever blank you're using, whatever type of product you're putting on it, whether you're using vinyl, whether you're using HTV, sublimation, whatever you're using, you need to keep those material costs in mind. Materials can also be everything from heat tape, transfer tape, if you are using butcher paper, printer paper, all of that type of stuff that you use to physically make your product is a material and should be considered in the cost of your product. You also want to take into account if you are shipping your item or even just selling locally, any kind of boxing that you use. So if you get a box to put your mug in, most tumblers seem to come with a good box that you can use, but if you want to add additional boxes, bags, thank you cards, care tags, anything like that, any type of packaging, bubble wrap, tissue paper, stickers, all of that needs to be thought into your process. Now, I'm not going to go over the cost of the shipping materials, shipping costs, any of that type of stuff, because it is so broad. There are so many things you can use for packaging, and there are so many places that you can ship, and the cost is so different depending on where you live and where you're shipping to, that I didn't want to kind of go into that, but it's really easy to, with the formula that I use, figure out about how much you should additionally charge for your product for what you buy to ship in. Now, you're of course going to want to pay yourself for the work that you do. So the way I always think about it is figure out how much you want to be paid an hour. So you can choose that cost based on really what you feel your value is. For this video, we're going to say that we want to make $20 an hour, but you can charge whatever you want. It's up to you. Do what you want. Do what makes you comfortable. But for me, we'll just go with $20 just for math's sake. It's just a lot easier. Another thing that you need to factor in is what we call overhead costs. So those can be things like your internet, your electricity, maintenance if you have a machine that requires maintenance, like if you're using a Glowforge and you need to clean it, so you need to get all the cleaning supplies, things like that are overhead costs. Now, granted, those are fairly minimal because you're using very little electricity. You're also probably using, very little internet necessarily. But those are things that you want to think about and add just a small upcharge for those, because you're using them for your business. You should get paid for them. Another thing that I always think about in overhead costs is paying yourself for the time that you're using to post your stuff to social media, list it on your Etsy or your website. Also, the cost of your website or the fees from your website or from Etsy. Those are things you want to keep in mind with the cost of your business. They are used to sell your item and should still be rolled in. Now, again, just like the electricity and the internet, it's going to be a fairly minimal amount of money, but it is something that you want to consider. Now, again, I'm not necessarily going to put those into my costs because I'm going to do this as if I was selling locally, but it's an easy thing to add. You can totally figure it out just by kind of following along and figuring out how I figure out the prices of everything else. Very simple. I promise this will be really easy for you. So now that we know we need to take into account materials, our time, and those overhead fees and any kind of shipping materials that we need, we can start thinking about how much those materials cost us. So when it comes to vinyl, I will actually divide it out and figure out what it costs per square inch. So with a 12 by 12 sheet of vinyl, to figure out a square inch, you multiply 12 by 12 and you get 144 square inches. Then let's say I'm doing a 5 by 5 decal. This is bigger, sorry. But let's just say we're doing a decal. You're gonna go ahead and divide the size of your decal out. So if we're doing a 5 by 5 decal, that is 25 square inches. And then all you need to do is figure out the cost of each square inch of your vinyl. So 144 divided by the cost of that 12 by 12 sheet. Now I'll give you a breakdown a little bit better in just a minute because I'm gonna go over examples. But that is how I figure out the cost. So it is a little bit of math, but it is really simple math. And we all know we always have a calculator in our pockets with our phones. There's one on your computer. I'm sure you can figure it out. It's very, very easy. And I know if you're not a math person, I am not. I can actually do that math pretty good now, so we're good. Now, there are definitely traps and things that you can fall into when pricing your items. And one of the main ones I see is that other people compare themselves to other people. And that is something you simply need to not do. It's hard, and I know that, because obviously, I do it too, follower counts, likes, things like that. It's all really hard not to go look at other people that are in our niche and want to be like them, want to do better than them. That's just nature. But what I really encourage you to do is to look inside yourself, figure out what your costs are, figure out what your prices are, because trying to go lower than them is actually going to devalue your business, and it is also going to not make you any profit whatsoever. So make sure that you're pricing your items according to what you're paying for things, what your profit needs to be. Don't fall into that trap of trying to lower your prices to someone else's rates. And also another trap is to not do the math, not figuring out what these materials cost you, not figuring out that you paid, let's say $10 for this tumbler and you're going to charge $15 for it total, but you've put more of material into that than $15 worth. So that's a big trap that people fall into, and that's why I'm making this video to help you out. So we're gonna go into some real world pricing items. So we're gonna start with the vinyl decal. Now, like I said, this is bigger than 5 by 5. This is one I just whipped up today, but we'll use it as a 5 by 5 example, like I just said. So what I do is I figure out the cost of my vinyl. So I'm gonna use a 12 by 12 sheet of vinyl, and I paid 65 cents from 143 Vinyl for this. I'll link a bunch of stuff down below for you, just in case you're looking for really good prices on materials and blanks. But anyways, so what I figured out was that the 12 by 12 piece of vinyl is 144 square inches. Now, what I did was I divided that 144 square inches, I divided 65 cents into that. That makes each inch of vinyl 0.004 cents. So super cheap, really inexpensive, which is great. So then what you need to do is figuring out that a 5 by 5 vinyl decal is going to be 25 square inches. Then you multiply the 25 by the 0.004, and that brings you to the cost of your vinyl, which is 12 whole cents. So super cheap, really inexpensive. It's one of the reasons I do really recommend selling vinyl decals. You can actually make them pretty inexpensively. So now we need to figure out the square footage of our transfer tape. Now I use a 12-inch wide by 30-foot long roll of medium tack transfer tape. By figuring that out, it cost me $9.75 for the entire roll. So I first needed to figure out how many inches was in 30 feet, which is 360. Then what I needed to do was multiply that 360 by 12, and we got 4,320. That's how many square inches we have. Then we need to divide 4,320 into that 9.75 cost, which gave us only about 6 cents a square foot for our transfer tape. Super cheap, really inexpensive. Now we're going to assume that we're going to use about the same size transfer tape as we are vinyl, so we're going to use a 5x5 piece of transfer tape. That transfer tape is going to cost us about 18 cents. So we've got 12 cents and 18 cents, which brings us to 30 cents in material costs. Now, if you're doing vinyl decals and it's only one color, super easy to figure out, but if you're doing multiple colors, you just need to do that math per color. Now, you're probably thinking, with it only costing me about 30 cents, why can't I sell them for really, really cheap? It's only 30 cents in materials. Well, you need to think of some other factors. One factor to think about is, did you pay for the design that you used? Are you paying a subscription to use the design that you have? Did you design it yourself? Because that's going to take time. Did you buy a font for it? Did it, require other pieces and parts from other things? So that's why you want to add a little bit extra. So let's say that the design I chose cost me $1. I'm going to go ahead and pass that on to the consumer. So we're up to $1.30. Now let's say that this design totally took me 15 minutes to put in the design space, cut, weed, and apply the transfer tape. Knowing that I want to be charged $20 an hour, my labor cost is $5. So we're at about $6.30. Now, I, of course, like I said, want to go ahead and make sure that I charge a little bit of overhead for that electricity, all the things, plus a little bit of cost for the machine maintenance, things like that. So by doing that, I usually make it about 50 cents. I usually will try to round it up to a more even number. So I'm going to go with about $7 total for my 5x5 vinyl decal. Now, another thing is you're going to want to package that decal, whether you're selling it locally or whether you're selling it to ship. So you want to think about the costs of how you're going to package. I like to use little 6x6 paper envelopes. I get 50 of those paper envelopes for $10.99, making them about 22 cents an envelope. So let's call it $7.25. Plus, now if I want to ship it as well, I'm going to need to ship it, and that does cost. But if you're fine not using a tracking number, you can just mail it with a regular forever stamp, which are like 53, 54 cents. So if you want to pass that on, you can put your decal at about $8. That is a pretty decent price for a 5x5 decal. Now, I would keep that same $8 price for local, even though the cost is a little bit less than that. You want to give a little more up to your price as far as making some more profit. Now, once you've added all those factors in, cost, things like that, plus you want to think about if you want to include a little instruction card. So I think $8, once you get all of the materials kind of figured out and cost, seems like a pretty decent price. So now let's talk about if we're going to do a sublimation tumbler. So I'm going to give you a couple like real world examples here with costs and everything. So I bought an 8-pack of tumblers and I paid $40 for that 8-pack. Now granted, I did not pay $40 for it, but when you're pricing, you always want to use retail pricing. You do not want to use sale prices. So you price at what it would have cost you retail to buy these. So at retail, these would have been at $40, so they're $5 a piece for an 8-pack. This design was $3, so I want to make sure that I pass that cost on to my consumer as well. Now we need to think about what sublimation ink and paper is going to cost us. And generally, I'm not going to sit here and try to figure out how much ink I use or how much one sheet of paper costs. So I usually do those at about 10 to 20 cents a piece. So we'll just do 10 cents each. So that's an additional 20 cents to our cost of materials. We'll also need to think about butcher paper, and I do that as the same way. I call that about 10 cents as well because it's not really like worth it for me to divide it out. But that's just a product that you want to kind of add in, so just add that extra like 30 cents for those three things. And then I also added additional 20 cents for the heat tape, so that's 50 cents total just for extra materials. Now let's say it takes me 30 minutes to print, press all the things on this tumbler, so my labor cost is $10. And then I'm just going to add $1 for the use of my press, my electricity, my internet, all the things. Now these do come with a box that would be perfect for packaging, so you don't need to charge for packaging because that's already included in the cost of your $5 tumbler. So that breaks down to about $19.50. So you can tell, the cost of this for you to make it would be $19.50. So now we need to figure out, okay, if it's $19.50 and that's not profit. That's all like labor costs, all material costs. What do you think that you would sell this for, and what's a comfortable amount of money for you to make? Now, paying yourself, I don't consider that to be a profit. I consider that to be a business cost. So something like this in my area can sell between $30 and $35. So for that, I'm gonna say, let's say we do it at $30. You're gonna make about $10.50, which is a great profit on this cup, because you can then take that $10.50 and either roll it back into your business to buy more materials or put it away and save it for a nest egg. A lot of times what I like to do is I will take the labor costs of which I pay myself, so my $10, and then I will take the profit and I will actually split those up. So the $10 might go back into my business that I've paid myself, and the profit costs will go into a savings account to save for later emergencies, things like that. I don't have examples for everything, but let's just say that I do. So this is a mug. Now this obviously is a sublimation mug, but let's say we got a mug from the Dollar Tree. So that mug's gonna cost us $1.25. Now typically I don't add the cost of tax to my products just because it's pretty minimal, and I make that tax cost up into my profit. Now I'm gonna use 3 colors of vinyl, and it's gonna be 65 cents per 12 by 12 sheet. And I'm gonna be using a 3 by 3 section of each vinyl, so it's gonna cost me about 12 cents. Then we'll be using about 6 cents in transfer tape for this. And the font that I'm gonna use is included in a subscription. Let's just say it's included in Creative Fabrica, which I pay $4.99 for a month. Now, granted, while that font doesn't cost me any additional, that subscription does, so you wanna make sure that you're including that cost into your product. So I'm just gonna add an additional $1 for that, just to have something in some way for that font to be paid. Now you can charge whatever you want for that, but I would highly recommend adding an additional charge if you use a font, if you use a design, even if it's one that you already own, because you paid for that subscription. So a great way to pay this yourself back for that subscription is to make sure that you're putting that cost onto your consumer. So my total cost of materials for this mug is only $2.43. Let's say it takes me 30 minutes to make the mug, so that's $10. So that brings us up to $12.43. Now, of course, I want to add that 50 cents for my electricity and my other incidentals, so that makes it $12.93. Now that's just the cost of materials and labor. Now, if I'm going to sell this locally, I'm not just going to want to hand this to my customer and pray that they don't break it at the event or on their way home. So I'm going to want to provide a bag or a box or bubble wrap or tissue paper or something for that. So depending on what you use, you'll need to figure out the cost per item, but usually it's about $1 for the bubble wrap and the bag that I use. That brings us up to $13.93 in cost. So of course I need to add some profit, and I like to just make them super even numbers. So I'm gonna just add a few dollars, and we're gonna make it up to $18 for a mug. Now in this area that sells really well, and that's again something you're gonna have to do a little research on, a little trial and error on in your spot, because not all areas are going to be able to get the same amount of money for things that other areas might. So something to keep in mind. Figure out kind of what works for the space that you are in, but still do not undercharge yourself. You are worth it. Now we're going to talk HTV, so I'm going to just use this shirt as an example because this was about a 10 by 10 area. Now I'm using glitter HTV, which does cost more, so I want to figure out how much that $3.75 sheet costs per square inch. So something like that, I'm using a 12 by 12 sheet. It's about 2 cents per square inch. So that makes it about $2.80 for the 10 by 10 space that I used. Now for something like that, you can always up it to the $3 and just make it an even number. That little 20 cents isn't gonna make a huge difference, and you can always just call that your electricity incidentals, but we're gonna do exact numbers here just to make it easier. So $2.80 in HTV. My shirt was $3.72 from shirtspace.com. I'm gonna use a design that cost me $1. So my total material costs for this shirt are $7.32. Now, this shirt took me about 20 minutes to make total, let's say. So that's $7.50 that I want to pay myself. That makes our total cost up to $14.82. Now, I want to, of course, charge for the heat press use, the electricity, the machine use, so I'll add another $1, making it $15.82. So then you, of course, want to add for profit, and typically in our area, the shirts sell anywhere from $22 to $25. So we'll just charge $22 for this one. And for the $22 you charge for this shirt, you're gonna make $6.18. So it's a pretty good profit on a t-shirt. For our last example, we're going to talk about hoodies. These can usually sell for a pretty decent amount of profit. They sell really well, and if you find a good quality hoodie, you're going to be able to sell this super well. So I got my hoodie from shirtspace.com, and it cost me $15.29. Now I'm going to be using an example with 2 colors of HTV. This one has way more, but it's fine. So with our 2 colors of HTV, I was actually able to buy 5-foot rolls of those, which brings my cost of HTV down quite a bit. So if you are using colors you know you're going to use a lot, the blacks, the whites, the blues, the reds, try to buy larger quantities because you're going to be able to save money because it's going to cost you less per square inch. So your profit will be higher because you're still going to be able to charge a pretty decent amount. Now with these, so they're 5-foot rolls, so I have to figure out how much each square inch is, and it is 2 cents per square inch. Now I'm doing a 10 by 10 section, that's gonna be $1, and then I'm gonna do a 6 by 8 section, and that is gonna be 96 cents, so about $1. Now this shirt took me 15 minutes from start to finish, so I'm charging $5 my time, and then I'm gonna charge $2 for the use of my heat press, the electricity, and for the use of like my computer and my machine. I'm charging a little bit more because my heat press had to be on longer and I had to do 2 presses, so it took just a little bit more electricity. Now you can kind of just figure out what you want to charge for that, but you definitely want to add a little bit of extra into your costs for that. So my total for the shirt is $24.25. That is the cost to make the shirt. Now with a hooded sweatshirt, I can definitely charge a lot more than I can with a t-shirt. So for this, I can charge anywhere from about $35 to $40. Your profit can be up to $15.75 with a hoodie. Now you'll notice that yes, while this one had a much higher material cost, this was actually a higher profit item because it's something that can sell for much more. Now, like I said before, when it comes to buying materials, if you can buy it in larger quantities, you can definitely make your costs lower. But you don't want to overbuy, which I know can be kind of hard to judge and figure out how many you need. One great way to kind of avoid that is if you're a seller, do pre-orders. Have people pre-order the item, if it's a shirt, a cup, a mug, whatever it might be, and you can figure out how many you need, order that in, order enough of the materials, and you're not going to have a lot of leftovers. Now, if you're doing pre-orders, I do always recommend grabbing a little extra of each of the things that you're going to need, just in case you have a mistake or something happens. So if you need 10 small shirts, 10 large shirts, and 10 medium shirts, order 12 of each. You can always offer those extra shirts for, people who maybe missed the pre-sale, something like that. That's a way to help keep your costs down. Now, being able to purchase your tumblers, your mugs, your shirts, whatever you're using, your vinyl, your HTV in bulk, like I said, huge option because it's going to help save you money. Now I'm going to link a few of my favorite places to order that type of stuff down below for you because I've been doing this a long time and I worked with a lot of companies and some are not so great and some are wonderful. So I'm going to list the wonderful ones down below. That way you don't have to go searching. I know a lot of other small businesses really won't want to share that kind of stuff. They've worked really hard to find their manufacturers, find their suppliers, but for me, I'm an open book. So if you want to know where to get something, I am your girl. I hope that this video helped you figure out how to price your materials. I hope some of these real world examples helped you kind of come up with a formula as to how you can price each of your items.
I wanna stay forever. We could be good together.
If you have any questions, please leave those in the comments down below. I'm always happy to answer those for you. I hope you guys picked up some tips and tricks. I know that pricing can be really nerve-wracking, and I know sometimes that telling people your price can be really scary, but you shouldn't be afraid. If they don't want to pay for your quality product, they're not your customer. They're not your people. That's okay. They can move on and find somebody else that does it for less, but it's probably not as good quality as what you do. So just focus on yourself, your heart, your business, and you are going to succeed. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and as always, happy crafting. Also wanted to pop in and say, if you've made it this far into the video, because I know not everybody does, I want you to leave your small business linked down below. I always love looking through small businesses. I buy from small businesses all the time. So be sure to leave your information as to where I can find your small business, and I'm going to be doing some shopping. So I hope you guys have a great day, and again, happy crafting.